Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the books I read in January and then some of the films that I watched in December and January, because I didn't actually talk about films for December, so let's get into it. Another thing of note, the lighting might change, so I do apologise for this amateur setup, but anyway. So the first book I read in January was The Bell in the Lake by Lars. I don't know whether I'm saying the surname correctly, but this is a Norwegian translation and it's a historical romance novel, and blimey, this was beautiful. I started reading it a couple of days after Christmas and it just really hooked me in. I thought it was brilliantly written, the characters were fascinating, and basically it's this very interesting mix of romance, tradition and newness. So it's set in 1880, so you're at the cusp of a time where everything's becoming more industrialized. So it's set in a small village in Norway, and there's two outsiders that come to this village. One is a priest, Kai Schweigard, and then a German architecture student, Gerhard Schönauer. Don't know whether I'm pronouncing that right again. They both sort of gravitate towards this young woman, Astrid, who is our sort of main character for the story. And it's just basically about these three people, their burgeoning feelings for each other in a time where things are changing, and that change can be scary, and it's literally something that will never be the same again. I think things like this are really fascinating, like history where there's just a change that really does transform society. This sort of explores the idea of, is progress always a good idea, or is what we have already something amazing and special? Plot also revolves around the demolishing of a old church and the building of a new one, and so it's sort of, again, it's talking about change, but this old church also represents ties to folklore and village legends about the sister bells, which is where the bell in the lake comes from, because there's these two bells that have this really sort of powerful mythology around them, and they're connected to Astrid's family as well. So in the destruction of one church and the creation of a new one, it's also symbolic of how Christianization of Norway happened. From the old church, there's elements of mythology, so there's things like Ragnarok is mentioned, there's the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr or something like that, again, pronunciations are rubbish, and then this is sort of then replaced by this just very plain new church, and it's this village has now just then lost a part of their connection to the past and to their heritage, and then it's being shipped off to Germany because they want to preserve it. But I thought it was a brilliant novel, and I can't wait to read the second book that I think it comes out in a couple of months. Normally I don't get hardbacks, but I think I might just have to get the hardback version because I really want to know what happens. It is also quite emotional. There are sad things that happen in this. I wasn't prepared for them, so I did cry my eyes out. But yeah, this book takes you on a bit of a journey, and I really enjoyed it, so I definitely recommend this. Something I sometimes think about as well is movie adaptations. This would be ripe for either a movie or a mini-series. If I could choose someone to direct it, I would potentially, I know he's Danish, but I would say Thomas Vinterberg, because he did a brilliant job with Far From the Madding Crowd. I thought that was absolutely beautifully shot, and he's an awesome director. But if we wanted to stick with authentic Norwegian, don't really know many Norwegian filmmakers, but the obvious choice would perhaps be Joachim Trier, who's probably the most famous director from Norway at the moment because of his latest movie, The Worst Person in the World. I've watched a couple of his movies, so I think he could do it. He's never done a period drama, I don't think, so that would be something new. I would love to see this adapted on screen, and I think that kind of needs to happen. Next, we are going to move on to the Midnight Library by Matt Hague. So I listened to it on audiobook. It was narrated by Carrie Mulligan. She did a really good job. The only thing I will say is it was okay. Like, the book was okay. It didn't really feel like anything new. I feel like it was kind of like almost just a rehash of other books by Matt Hague. I guess that's his thing. Like, it's the mental health sort of literature. I don't really know what to call it, but it's the idea that his books are a little bit healing because it's about people who are struggling with existence, and a lot of people can relate to it. So I guess it's the idea that he's writing with that purpose to try and help people, but I just felt like it was kind of too formulaic. Like, I knew how it was going to end before I picked up the book. It was deliberate, obviously, because you don't want to tell people, the life you're currently living isn't the best life for you, so it had to kind of end that way for it to be Matt Hague. Right, and then I'm also currently reading a couple of other things. At the moment I am reading Charles Baudelaire's poems. This is The Flowers of Evil, or Les Fleurs du Mal. Basically this is a dual language copy, so it's got the poems in French side by side with the English translations. Really great practice for someone trying to learn French who's been trying to learn it for too many years, gets distracted by every other language they come across, starts learning it, then drops it because they realise, you know what, I am like really quite far with French. If I just keep going, then I could become fluent and read books in French and watch French movies without subtitles and actually go to France one day and talk to people. So my mission this year is to really work on my French, and only French. No other language is going to tempt me away this year. So yeah, I've been reading his poetry. I really enjoy it. His writing is really quite beautiful. Some of it's a bit depressing, but like, c'est la vie. Is what it is. I kind of gravitate towards stuff like that, like the more sort of impassioned and sort of, I don't know, melancholy. I think it's more beautiful, because really existence is a bit melancholy. It's beautiful but also painful at the same time, and I think he captures that as well. Like, there's this sort of phrase in French, like le spleen or something like that, and it's just like the melancholy boredom of existence, which I think that just sums everything up quite well. Don't know when I'll finish this. It's sort of something that I'm dipping in and out of, spending a few hours reading with a cup of coffee in hand. It just feels like a great time, to be honest. And then the final book I've started reading in January, but I haven't finished, I haven't really got too far into it, is Salammbô by Gustave Flaubert. So this is it's a bit of a strange one, this. I really enjoyed Madame Bovary and I wanted to read some more of Flaubert's stuff, but this is totally different. So this is set in the 4th century. It's a historical epic, some would say, and it's set in Carthage. One thing I am very aware of is that this is going to be very, very controversial to modern taste. So this was written in a time where colonialism, Orientalism, it's going to be very much an exoticization of others. But I think it's important to read books like this to sort of see that attitude. And another thing I need to read, probably alongside this, so I need to actually get a copy, is Edward Said's Orientalism, which I did sort of use some of that text for uni when I was reading colonial literature. And it is fascinating how it's presented and why was this acceptable? Why? But yeah, so I do find that kind of interesting, and I want to sort of deconstruct it and look at it like that. So that's going to be something I do. And yeah, like, I've read quite a lot of literature with like colonial aspects. Like, for example, there's a Robert Louis Stevenson book that I had to read, which just screamed, what the fuck, mate? Then there's also like Arthur Conan Doyle's Sign of the Four, screams, what the fuck, mate? Another thing that I need to read at some point, but this is more to like do with TV, is what's it called? Around the World in 80 Days. That probably screams in the French original colonialism, but I have actually been watching the BBC drama with David Tennant, which I think is interesting. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, it's so woke because there's a woman and a black man in the cast, but I think it's important that that's happened, because I'm sure, like, I can guarantee 100% that it is so problematic if you just read it, and if you were just to translate it onto screen as it is, it would scream exoticization and colonialism. So I think it was important that they had to change some aspects of it, but it's also interesting the dynamic that they put into the show. Anyway, I'm not actually reading that at the moment. I've got it on my bookshelf in French, but I can't read it, which is why I'm reading stuff like this. So they are the books that I've been reading this month. Next, we're going to talk about movies. I'm not going to really talk about TV shows because basically I've just been watching a few things. So like The Witcher, obviously Henry Cavill as Geralt is chef's kiss. What else have I been watching on TV? Oh yeah, The Silent Sea. Korean drama, that was really weird, quite disturbing and just really quite creepy. I hope they do a second season. Really great performances in it, like from Gong Yoo and Bae Doona. Yeah, so that's probably like the two highlights that I've been watching, The Witcher and The Silent Sea. Yeah, I can't really say I've been really watching much TV recently. It's been more so movies. Movie-wise, I'm going to quickly just talk about the films that I watched in December because I didn't actually do like a December-focused wrap-up. One of them was Passing, which is directed by Rebecca Hall and stars Ruth Negga and Tessa Thompson. It's based on the Nella Larson short story novella of the same name. It's about black women passing in society as white women. And man, that is a beautiful film, complex, compelling, very sort of raw, beautiful. Loved the way it was filmed, loved the aspect ratio, like symbolising confinement, the sort of tinkling jazz motif that kept repeating. Again, is that a sort of metaphor for the repetition of oppression in society? I don't know whether I'm just being that bitch that overanalyzes everything, but it feels like this is the kind of film where a lot of decisions were made to symbolise something. And I think it's Rebecca Hall's first movie, and it was really quite brilliant. And it's interesting because she's got a lot of history tied into this novel. So she found out that one of her, I think it was great-grandfather or great-grandfather, actually did pass as a white man. So there's sort of that complexity to the story as well. So I thought that was fascinating when I watched like a Q&A. Brilliant. It's on Netflix. Watch it. I have actually now got the short story because I was like, why haven't I read this yet? So I will be reading this at some point this year. What else have we watched? Annette, which is like a weird musical, like romance drama crime thing, bit bonkers really, but it's got what's his face, Adam Driver in it, Marion Cotillard, and then like one of the people from Big Bang Theory, and it's just trippy, weird, kind of wonderful, but really weird, like really weird. There's like a puppet in it that is a child. But that's clearly a metaphor for something. It's the idea of greed, exploitation. I mean, the child is a puppet because it's sort of stuck between two adults sort of using it for their own end and sort of manipulation in that way. Great metaphor in some cases. It was an okay film. It's not the kind of thing I would perhaps watch again, but I watched it because it just seemed quite fascinating, and like I like Marion Cotillard and Adam Driver, and yeah, some of it was great. Like some of the way things were staged was really quite cool. I'd recommend it if you want to just see something a bit weird, unusual, and very sort of magical realism-esque. Watch the German film I'm Your Man or something like that. The German title is like Ich bin dein Mensch. Yeah, so it's about a woman that, to get a grant for her research, agrees to test out a companion robot. I actually found the film a bit underwhelming. Like from the trailer it looked like it was going to be really great, but it was just sort of okay. It was quite an interesting look at like dynamics between technology and people and how reliant people are on technology. Is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Is that where we're headed in the future, where robots will become human companions? Who knows? Dan Stevens was in it and he spoke German in a British accent because he's a robot, but it was kind of good. I think I wanted more from it, and maybe that was unfair. Where were we? Oh yeah. Then I watched a couple of Ang Lee movies. I've never actually seen him his work until December, but I watched Lust Caution. Brilliant, dark, loved it. Lust Caution is set during the Japanese occupation of Shanghai and Hong Kong, and it follows a young group of sort of amateur revolutionaries as they decide that they're going to try and assassinate a high official in sort of puppet government. So they play roles and sort of try and trick this man into falling in love with one of the females. It's a really good espionage British historical drama. I definitely recommend it if you like that sort of thing. And then Sense and Sensibilities, Jane Austen, fabulous. I think it's got Emma Thompson in that one, Kate Winslet, Alan Rickman, some of the best actors in British cinema. It's sort of run-of-the-mill, looks like a Jane Austen adaptation, feels like a Jane Austen adaptation. It wasn't really reinventing the wheel or anything. A serviceable film, I would say. And then the final film, I think it was actually the final film that I watched in 2021 overall as well, was The Green Knight. Wow, that was quite a dark, beautiful, twisted, crazy film. Perhaps like one of the best films I watched last year. It certainly makes you feel a way. It's based on a medieval chivalric tale, and that came across on the screen. Like, it felt almost very fairy tale like. Dev Patel was really great as Gawain. I really don't know how to say it. Like Sir Gwen. No, Gwen's a female name. Like, he did a fantastic job in the role. And like, I think one of the best parts of it was like the giants. That's in the trailer, and it's a little bit longer in the film, but it was just like so weird and beautiful. Brilliant film, totally recommend it if you haven't seen it already. And now on to the movies I saw in January. First movie I saw was the new Matrix film, Matrix Resurrections. A lot of people hated it. I kind of loved it, to be honest. It's not trying to be a rehash of the Matrix, like that was so obvious in the film. It was almost quite tongue-in-cheek and so meta that it was kind of hilarious. I don't know whether it's just me having shit taste in movies. I don't think I do, to be honest, but I guess nobody thinks they have shit taste. I enjoyed it. Don't care if nobody else did, to be honest. It was fun. Loved the name of the coffee shop, Simulate. Brilliant. But yeah, like maybe it was just a cash in on nostalgia. Talking of nostalgia cash ins, Spider-Man. What was that if it wasn't like cashing in on the nostalgia of the previous movies? It was fun, kind of brilliant. I cried. They cried. It was just a fun movie. That's basically all Marvel is, really, is it's not like sensational artistic pieces of cinema. It's a fun time, and I had a blast watching it. I've been watching Marvel films for, well, since like the X-Men back in the day. Am I ever going to stop watching them? Probably not, unless like they are really dire. Lord of the Rings, rewatched the trilogy because I'm obsessed. Love it so much, and I was just having like a bad time, to be honest, so I stuck it on and thought, yeah, like this will cheer me up, and it did. Except from like the last hour of Return of the King that literally makes me cry every sodding time. It's just part of the experience, isn't it? If you don't cry at the end of Return of the King, then like, are you even human? It's the music, it's the goodbyes. But like the thing that choked me up this time was when like they've just like destroyed the ring, and then Sam's crying about if he could have, then he would have married Rosie. He's expecting to obviously die on this volcano. Like, that really choked me up this time for some reason. Each time it's a different thing that really makes me cry, but it's emotional, beautiful. I'm probably going to have to reread Lord of the Rings at some point this year. Love those movies. I'm kind of really excited for the TV show that's coming out later this year. I think it could be great, especially now that we know it's definitely going to be around a certain period in the Second Age, which, while I haven't read the Silmarillion yet, I know quite a lot of the lore just from reading about it. So obviously I'll read the Silmarillion at some point this year before the TV show. I mean, famous last words, because we've got Eye of the World right here that I didn't read before the Wheel of Time TV show came out. But to be honest, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, obviously I'm not a diehard fan because I've never read the book, so it was kind of okay, but it wasn't particularly great. Like, the first couple of episodes I thought were, oh, okay, this is half decent, pretty good, and I was just like, it kind of looks really cheap and like not believable fantasy world. Like, sometimes a world can be believable, like for example Lord of the Rings, like the Peter Jackson films, they feel believable. I don't know whether it's because Tolkien infused his worlds with so much rich detail, but it's probably like the practical effects and the real world locations that Peter Jackson used, like the fact that the cities were like miniature models, but like kind of massive models, but still miniature, so there was a realness to them, whereas in Wheel of Time there was a lot of CGI and it just felt a bit gross. So I'm hoping that for the Rings of Power they follow on from Peter Jackson's legacy of making real films. Obviously this is a TV show. I think it's the most expensive TV show ever made, so but it should be good. But yeah, like, this is not like a speculation video. We're just literally in passing talking about Lord of the Rings, but I could talk about Lord of the Rings for hours. Then other films I watched loads of French films. Like I said earlier in the video, I'm trying to dedicate myself to French this year. First one was the weirdest one, Deerskin or Le Dame. Bizarre. It's got Jean Dujardin in it. If you've seen The Artist, it's that guy. He plays like this absolute nut job. But the premise of the film is that this guy buys a vintage deerskin jacket and just basically loses the plot. And then he decides, because this jacket starts talking to him, or he imagines it talking to him, basically gives him this mission of getting rid of all other jackets in the world. And it's just very, very strange. Hilarious in points. Like the weapon he wields, because he does go psycho, is just quite original and weird and hilarious. Slowly he acquires more deerskin items of clothing, and it's almost like the more bits of deerskin that he applies to himself, the less human he is, the more animal he becomes. I don't know what that's trying to say, but other than a midlife crisis is a bad time and can make you go crazy. It's just insane. It's on Mubi. Watch it if you just want to watch something really weird. And I watch a lot of weird movies, but this has to be one of the weirdest. Bac Nord, or as it's on Netflix in England, The Stronghold. It's set in Marseille, and it follows like this team of people that do drugs busts, so they're on the Bac Nord team. It's got Jean Lelouch in it, another guy, Francois Civy, and Adele Exarchopoulos. Yeah, it's really quite intense. Like, there's this raid that they do that literally, I was like, it was really, really well done, and it made you really anxious. Quite a good film. I think Adele Exarchopoulos was like underutilised. She was relegated to just the sort of love interest role, which is a shame because she's a really great actress. But I guess this was just like a dude film. Celle que vous croyez, Who You Think I Am, which I think actually also, yeah, it's got Francois Civy in it, and it's got Juliette Binoche, who does a phenomenal performance. But the premise is, it's quite a twisty one, but it's the idea of this woman who has a young lover, but he becomes uninterested in her and kind of just like abandons her, and she feels shit. So then she decides to create a fake profile online to sort of stalk him, but then she ends up befriending his best friend, and then they start talking, and she basically pretends to be a 24-year-old, and they start having a relationship online, but she tries to hide that she's obviously a 50-year-old woman rather than a 24-year-old. There's like elements of what is real, what is imagination, who is lying, deals with the sort of complexity of growing older as a woman, and how basically youth is almost like a currency in romance. Like, as you get older, you become less desirable. That doesn't mean that you don't desire, kind of thing. Yeah, like, I've seen it before. I watched it a couple of years ago, and I decided to watch it again because I hoped that it would have French subtitles on Netflix, but clearly it's only got English subtitles, so it's like, it's a bit annoying. Juliette Binoche is just phenomenal in, like, I don't know how she manages to make sitting typing on a computer or on her phone compelling acting, like, masterclass there. And then the final film I watched was actually probably the worst film I watched. Friend Zone. It's like this French rom-com on Netflix, really quite formulaic, but you know what, is what it is. I might have learned something from it. It's just listening practice. Like, I think one of the hardest things about French is how fast French people speak, and then it's also like this thing called la liaison. So it's where words join together. So if like a word begins with not a consonant, a vowel, and the word before, it will just connect. And then there's this slang called Velan, which is like French backwards, and then sometimes it's reordered again, so it's just like you can't keep up. Things are shortened, like nobody says je suis anymore. It's like suis, je ne sais pas, je sais pas. It's just like things like that you wouldn't ever learn in a classroom, but through watching movies or TV shows you pick things up. Get ready for more French films in the future. But out of the French movies I watched this month, I would definitely recommend Deerskin if you're a weirdo. Backnor if you like sort of crime, drug, action sort of dramas, and Who You Think I Am as well if you're interested in sort of like psychological complexities in relationships and how like people use and abuse technology and like lie and things like that. So this has been me talking about a couple of books and then 100 billion movies as usual. I don't know how often I'm going to do videos because quite often I just feel like I don't have anything to say, and it's quite easy for me to do sort of these end of the month things because I've got lots to say suddenly. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, like, whatever, share, ring the bell. Don't really know what else to say. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back again soon-ish with another video. Let me know what kind of videos you want to see, because I don't really know what I'm doing with this. Yeah, so if you've got any suggestions of videos you'd like me to do, then leave them in the comments. But anyway, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.